Yesterday I saw perhaps 50 of us at charge conference. Between our own two congregations and 4 others, we gathered together over in White Hills. And then I drove down into the Bronx to the City Society's 100th birthday celebration for Reverend Dr. John Carrington, where there were perhaps another 150 people. Perhaps some of you might be familiar with Dr. Carrington. He was a major, I'm getting a nod or two. It's the same over at Aldersgate, right? It's good to know this isn't completely out of left field. But after that birthday celebration, I drove home and immediately slipped into a rather large red suit and walked down into the village to portray a rather famously jolly character for the Ardsley Christmas tree lighting. And afterward, we paraded back up to the firehouse where I met another 200 adults and children passing out presents and posing for pictures. But as I reflected on it, actually it's a misnomer to say that I met them, as the costume was so complete, so covering, fully covering, that only a handful of organizers actually knew that it was me under there. For many of those children, they weren't meeting or experiencing me at all. They were having an altogether more wonderful experience. When I offered Tim Lamort of the Rivertown's Dispatch a warm greeting, he confessed that he had no idea who was under all that. He seemed genuinely surprised that it was Wren Hillis under the flowing white beard. How did they get you to do this? He asked. And the answer was simple. When the community calls, we answer. Period. I've seen 4 other versions of you today, Tim said, and I could not help but start to joke with him. They were all me. Really? He asked. No. But if my beloved Catholic colleagues can explain the full doctrine of the transubstantiation, then surely we can drum up something on the metaphysical unity of all Santa Clauses. You're a very philosophical Santa, Tim replied drolly, which is, of course, undeniably true. It turns out that yesterday was actually the feast of St. Nicholas, and today we are going to celebrate communion. So the whole joke was a little on the nose. The feast honors the historical 4th century bishop of Myra, which is modern-day Turkey. He was known for secret generosity, inspiring the Santa Claus legend through the Dutch Sinterklaas. Celebrations involved leaving shoes or stockings out for small gifts like coins, candy, or treats, attending church services, and acts of charity, marking the start of Advent with traditions of kindness, generosity, and giving, especially for children. And eventually, Dutch settlers brought this tradition of Sinterklaas, St. Nicholas, to America, and over time, Sinterklaas evolved into the figure of Santa Claus, especially with his association with Christmas Eve. Now, we may not yet have solved the metaphysical unity quandary, but I found yesterday's juxtaposition of events quite rich. Certainly on the simplest level, to pass out our small gifts in full costume evokes in some small part the practice of secret gift giving. After all, the children didn't know it was me. But more to the point, it's remarkable to me how a life lived powerfully and prophetically can reverberate down through the ages. How seemingly small acts of charity can lead to the emergence of a global tradition of holiday cheer and of charity more than 1,500 years later. That, too, was a theme of Reverend Dr. John Carrington's 100th birthday celebration. mentioned, some of you might know him, but Dr. Carrington was and is a formidable force for justice and for good. After serving in the Air Force in the 1940s, he determined to become a preacher and joined the United Methodist Church after going to seminary at Drew Theological School. And after serving churches in New Jersey and New York, in 1968 he became the first black district superintendent in the New York Annual Conference. He then went on to become the first black executive director of the United Methodist City Society, where he served for 30 years. During his time in that role, he established many of the missions and ministries that continue today, some of which we support through our charitable giving. Camp Olmsted, he participated in expanding their grounds and putting conservation liens on deeds such that they would always remain available as camping sites for underserved children in the city. He helped establish the Far Rockaway Center for addiction treatment, and many others. But perhaps the one thing he is most well known for is during his time as executive director, he joined the board of the Brooklyn Methodist Hospital. He eventually became the chair and was quite singularly responsible for saving it from financial ruin in the 1980s. With other hospitals rapidly closing in Brooklyn, the Methodist Hospital became then and remains now a cornerstone of patient care in that borough. And for quite a time, it was one of the few places that really was serving, marginalized communities in that area. And in fact, today, they recognize still the importance of Dr. Carrington's work, and so as they described his legacy there yesterday, they noted that whenever somebody who is sick or in pain or injured comes into the hospital, and whenever a young family leaves with a new baby, both pass through the Carrington foyer. It's named after him. His name and his legacy is right there, that everyone passes through that entryway. Now, I don't know if legends will be told about Dr. Carrington in 1,500 years as it is with Sinterklaas. But one of the speakers yesterday made a powerful reference to Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech at the Mason Temple shortly before his assassination. And the quote is typically rendered thus: "The quality, not the longevity of one's life, is what is important." Of course, Dr. Carrington has had both quality and longevity, for which the only appropriate descriptor I can think of is legacy. But it remains the case that our faith often puts an emphasis on the quality and character of one's life, not necessarily its duration. And these themes are appropriate as we reflect on the legacy of Jesus of Nazareth, who, again, after only a few short years of ministry, in this season of Advent and throughout the coming liturgical year, we will remember the totality of his life, but really it was only a very short period of time that he was actively ministering, teaching, and working miracles throughout Galilee. And at the end of those few years, he too was cut down in his youth. And yet, because of the profound quality of his life, and certainly his divinity, we recognize that, but this morning, to emphasize the profound quality of his life, he left a legacy that utterly changed the world. So much so that we continue to look forward to a time when he might return and fulfill the prophecies of Isaiah that we've heard this morning. His delight shall be in the fear of the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes see, or decide by what his ears hear, but with righteousness he will judge for the poor, and decide with equity for the oppressed of the earth. He shall strike the earth with the rod of his mouth, and with the breath of his lips he shall kill the wicked. Righteousness shall be the belt around his waist. So, whether it was hearing from Reverend Law yesterday a teaching on the power and importance of old wine skins and new wine, those who were with us yesterday would have heard that. It's a lesson on celebrating the old, revering the legacies of the past, even as we recognize that we are in moments of transition and the future may look different. Or remembering Dr. Carrington's legacy, 100 years of faithful service. Or simply dressing up in a costume to remember a saint of the church for his simplicity, his charity and generosity that has left a lasting impression on the world. This Advent season, I would invite us to think not only of the coming time that we may share small gifts with one another, that we might receive gifts, but rather, what is the gift of our own life? What is the legacy of our own life that we are giving of ourselves, that we might be remembered, not to glorify ourselves, but that we might actually leave a lasting legacy and change, both individually, as a congregation, as a church. So too, on this second Sunday of Advent, may we receive this communion for the holy gift that it is, even as we are invited to pursue a life of profound quality and charity, either prophetically or in secret, that the world might be changed in these days, or even far into the future. May we also live lives that delight our Lord, ones that join our legacy unto his, and expand it in fulsome expectation of a time when we will be with